Justice Paul Newby, North Carolina Supreme Court for the last 8 years, a recipient of the North Carolina Bar Association's Constitutional Rights Award. He teaches state constitutional law at Campbell Law School. Lifelong North Carolina resident, born in Asheboro, grew up in Jamestown, graduated from Duke University and UNC School of Law, the Honorable Justice Paul Newby.
What is the purpose of government? For most of the history of the world, it has been believed that power, that might makes right, and that citizens or people are there simply to serve the government. We have a heritage. We have a heritage that says that government is there to protect fundamental rights and to serve the citizens, and yet that is under assault. Our state constitution in 1776 reminds us that a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty. Well, folks, for so long we've not done that. I'm grateful for groups like yours that encourage citizens to get back and look at the fundamentals, to look at the principles upon which we're founded, to read the federal constitution, to read the state constitution, to understand the limited government that we are fortunate to have, and to recognize when government usurps our rights, our freedoms, our liberties. It was 12:15 in the fields of Runnymede. I remember it well. I was a small child at the time. 12:15, the sheriff of Nottingham and his friend King John says, I have the right to do whatever I want to. I'm the government. I'm power. Your rights are whatever I say they are. I can go into your houses. I can take your stuff. The Baron said, King, with all due respect, you can't do that. We have fundamental rights. We have rights, as Jefferson would later say, that are endowed upon us by our Creator. They had a battle. The king lost. He had to sign this thing called the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. But since then, there continues to be this tension between governmental power and fundamental rights and freedoms. In 1760, the forebears, I believe, of the Tea Party movement were in this area of North Carolina. They were called the Regulators. And what was happening is they were recognizing abusive governmental power. They would go to the courts for justice. Would they get any? No. The judges were appointed by the king. They were minions of the king. So they bound themselves together. And they would go as a group to demand justice, to demand their equal rights, their fundamental rights. In 1776, when we sought to draft our state constitution, the very first thing we did was to set out 25 fundamental rights and freedoms. The right to assemble, the right to worship. Then we went home for the day and came back the next day to structure government. Why would we do that? Because we understand that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We understand that there's fundamental rights that the government is there to protect. Our rights are here, they are God-given, and the government is simply there to protect those rights. And when the government tries to reverse that role, it's wrong, and we've got to stand up and say, no more, you're out of order, you need to be there to protect us, not to usurp our freedoms and our liberties. North Carolina is the only state to have voted down the federal constitution. We voted it down, again, because we're freedom-loving people. We voted it down for two reasons. We did it in 1788. 1787, it was passed 225 years ago, this past Monday. We voted it down in 1788. Why? Two reasons. It begins, we the people instead of we the states. We said, wait a second, you're going to make the states irrelevant. You're going to make the role of the states so subservient to a federal government that it's going to be as if they didn't exist. The second reason we voted it down was because there was no protection of fundamental rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, a little bit of constitutional theory, sorry about that. The state constitution is a limitation on what the government can do. It is presumed in our constitutional republic that we grant all power to our legislators to act on our behalf. State House members, state senators, they act on our behalf. The cities, the counties, they only get power from the legislature. So the state constitution limits the power of what the General Assembly can do. Otherwise, they are acting on our behalf. That's the closest we get to democracy. The federal constitution, on the other hand, is supposed to be a limitation on the power of government. It is, a limited grant of power. The federal government supposedly only has the power that is granted in the federal constitution. So Hamilton and Madison argued, we don't need a Bill of Rights. The federal government doesn't have enough power to step on the rights of an average citizen. Our forefathers said, quite frankly, we don't believe you. We don't believe that this is such a limited grant of power, the federal Constitution. Therefore, you must protect fundamental rights and freedoms. It was only after the federal government proposed a Bill of Rights that North Carolina would then ratify the Constitution in 1789 and become the 12th state of the Union. We have a heritage, a God-given heritage of freedom and liberty, because we understand that our rights do not come from either of these documents. Our rights come from God because we're created in the image of God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me say a word about judges. Look at the health care decision. Look at the Arizona decision. Look at so many decisions across our nation. Scott Walker just confronted an activist judge up there in Wisconsin. Ladies and gentlemen, who your judges are matter. We have been electing judges in North Carolina since 1868. We did a poll a couple weeks ago. 51% of North Carolinians believe that judges are appointed, not elected. 51%. I mean, again, we've only been doing it since 1868. Maybe eventually we'll figure it out. But who your judges are matter. Most people have no idea who we are. Judges, good judges, constitutional judges need your help. This coming election, I will be on the ballot. I need your help. Quite frankly, Newbies have been in North Carolina since 1700. We just never did anything. Scooby-Dooby vote for Newby doesn't carry a lot of message, all right? But I need your help in getting the word out. What can we do to help the judges? Well, I'm glad you asked. I just happen to have with me right here a window glass sticker. You can do this for all the candidates. You put this on a car, it's worth 100 votes. Put it on a pickup truck, ladies and gentlemen, it's worth 500 votes. Now, if that pickup truck has a gun rack, it's worth 1,000 votes. And when deer season gets here, if you got a deer sticking out the back, put another 500 votes on that, all right? But we need your help. People don't know who the judges are, and if you will help us by emailing and things like that, most of your friends and family will say, thank you, we had no idea who the judges are. You know, we need to get back to the principles, the basic foundations upon which our country was set. When we as a nation in 1776, before July the 4th, thought about what are we going to do in order to get England to recognize our fundamental rights, it appears that they are going to go to war with us. It appears we're going to have to fight for these fundamental rights and freedoms. Before we decided to do that, before we declared our independence, the very first thing we did, our Congress did, was to call for a day of prayer. Listen to the words of your Congress. Think about this as the heritage that your Congress, your forefathers have given to you. It says, Congress, this was March 16, 1776. Congress desires to have people of all ranks and degrees duly impressed with a solemn sense of God's superintending providence and of their duty devoutly to rely on His aid and direction, to earnestly recommend Friday, the 17th day of May, be observed by the colonies as a day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer, that we may with united hearts confess and bewail our manifold sins and transgressions, and by sincere repentance and amendment of life, appease God's righteous displeasure, and through the merits and mediation of Jesus Christ, obtain this pardon and forgiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, if you love your country, pray and work hard. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard from the man at the center of the most important race in the state of North Carolina. We have to support the Supreme Court Justice Paul Newby, if nothing else. And I encourage you to get your friends and your family aware that the balance of power in the state of North Carolina hinges on this election. We cannot underscore that enough. Please carry that message with you.